and there's a lot of guys who need to hear this. She's not giving you the ring back in the divorce. You're not going to go pawn it. It's hers.
All right, well, we're here with attorney Robert Von Dohlen, family law attorney here in Houston, Von Dohlen Law Firm. Not just any family law attorney, but actually my family law attorney. Robert was going to write a prenup for me, but that relationship died. So no prenup needed. But we're just going to talk about divorce, marriage, the state of marriage today, and Texas divorce law thrown in a bit. Robert, why family law? Why did you go that route?
Man. So I started off doing insurance law because I have a deep insurance background. But I've been through the family law system myself 4 times. I've been divorced 4 times.
What? I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah. And I have 3 kids with wife number 2 and 1 kid with wife number 3. So I've been through the gamut down at the courthouse myself personally. I've lived it. And I really didn't want to go into that out of law school. I had this, aspirations of doing insurance work. But I don't know, it's kind of like that scene out of The Godfather 2, they keep pulling me back in. What's that scene?
Just when you think you're out, they pull me back in.
Pull me back in. Anyway, so, people started coming to me for advice on divorces, started handling a few, and I don't know, it just, it feels right. It's like the sum total of my life experience is something that I can really share with people. And that's kind of where I'm at in life. That's the thing I value the most out of getting up, and you get up and put on your work clothes. What's the thing you value doing most? And that's the thing I value doing most.
Yeah, that's odd how our hardships can prepare us for what we're going to do in life. And you think, okay, if I was going to create the ultimate divorce attorney, what would I do? I might have them get divorced 4 times, just to see how the situation works. And so you probably, when a client comes to you, you've been in their shoes a few times before. You know what they're going through.
Pretty much.
What do you dislike? What do you hate the most about your job, about being a divorce attorney?
Just all the red tape that comes with it. I mean, it necessarily involves a huge amount of red tape. I was thinking about this morning, it's tough doing divorce work. The courthouse, there's a ton of red tape to plow through there. You deal with the state of Texas on a lot of issues, or your state, wherever you are. It's never ending. That's got to be the thing I hate the most. There's always something, a case you think is all wrapped up, and then some court clerk stops the progress, or you're in front of the judge, and the judge just, whoop, time out, halt, go back and fix this. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, I came to you for a prenuptial agreement. Like, Robert, I'm thinking of moving in with my girl. I came to you about the law. The first thing you said was, go live in her town first. Go to her city and live with her. You went straight to the person aspect of like, do you even want to be with this person? Do we need to work on a prenuptial agreement at all? And I guess that was your life experience. Instead of any other attorney might have just wrote me a prenuptial agreement, but you were like, go live in the same city, because we lived in different cities. Go live in the same city with her for a month or 2.
Yeah.
And you actually saved me a lot of money, because after that couple of weeks, it was over. But
well, if you don't mind me talking about it.
No, let's talk about it.
So, it's pretty common. This is how family law cases happen, is that people fall in love, and it's so much easier as I approach 60 to be looking back and see how romance and love works, and what's real and what's not, and that emotional love feeling that that security blanket kind of thing, or lust, the physicality of it comes into it. We let that rule us and govern us, and then we make these hasty decisions that are made in love and out of good thoughts, except we've rushed so far so fast ahead, we didn't stop and consider all the realities along the way, you know? And you didn't see the reality that I saw was that, she's up here in this whole other part of the world, and her whole support system's there. And if you move her down here, you're it. And then if that doesn't work out between you, she's probably going to have some really hard feelings about the whole thing, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, you talk about people being in love. We're in love. And that's a personal thing, a human thing.
Yeah.
But we're in love. Let's get the state involved. It just seems so strange to me.
Let's get the state involved. Indeed. Now we're getting to the state of marriage these days, right?
Yeah.
I mean, man, I don't really think a lot about that. Like, what theoretical interest does the state have in marriage, right? And I guess there's some kind of a continuity of society, a predictability.
Yeah, maybe healthier families if there's a partnership raising the kid. I almost said man and woman and got canceled because anyone can raise kids.
Anyone can raise kids.
Okay,
yeah.
But you're right though, because what you were saying, you were talking about the state's interests are based on these traditional notions of a man and a wife getting married and raising children.
Right.
Okay, now we are slowly erasing those traditional notions of men and women getting married. Now, anyone can be a man or a woman, depending on how you think or feel that day. But we're still using these traditional divorce settings.
Yeah.
I feel like the men get screwed. Men, you're held to traditional standards. Everyone else, do whatever the hell you want.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about that one a little bit, but yeah, our traditional notions are gradually easing, changing. It's a changing of tides. And you look back through all of history, that's been a constant change.
How is divorce law adjusting to that?
Very slowly, case by case. We are still working through some of the same-sex issues, especially where children are involved. I think we pretty much got it down where property division's involved. So in a divorce, there's 3 components to the divorce. There's the divorce itself. Are we just going to divorce on no-fault grounds or fault grounds? That sort of thing.
Okay.
And then there's dealing with kid issues, right? If we
Children.
got kids in this marriage, we're going to have to deal with care, custody, health and welfare and the future of the child. The state does have an interest in that. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the area that Texas law is the most primitive, frankly.
Division of property.
Division of property, yeah. We're anchored to this community property notion that goes back to older Spanish law. That's where Texas derived its community property tenets, if you will, our bases that we build our laws on.
Got it.
And I'm not so sure that community property is the correct regime going forward.
Why not? Where's the schism there?
Right? Well, let's talk about who it does help for sure.
Okay.
If you are, and maybe let's look back to 1950.
Yes.
You might have to look at a sitcom to know it, because it's certainly before my time. But I have a vision in my head of what that looked like, and that's where this wife graduates high school, gets married, doesn't have any real out in the world work skills. Husband's gone to college. He's got a great job. The old-fashioned, he goes to work every day, and she stays home and raises the kids.
Yes.
Well, in that instance, they've acquired community property through his efforts and work, but and she's contributed to that. I mean, she helped that man get up and go to work every day. She was there for him every night when he came and needed to download his day.
Okay.
She raised his kids with him, right? She kept the house. And yet, when the time comes to divorce, what's she got? If there's not a community property regime, she may go out and be divorced with nothing.
Yeah.
And here he is with all the assets, right? I don't know that that's really fair to her. So for in that instance of community property, I agree with it. But that's not really the norm we have anymore. We're building this world where, and I have 3 daughters and 1 son, and I'm very grateful that my daughters have got as much opportunity in this world, I feel, as I ever did to get out and work and go to school, get an education.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 of my daughters are working on, either have advanced degrees or working on them, and great jobs. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so how is their situation different from the woman in 1950,
Right.
the homemaker in 1950?
Okay, so how I tie this together is now women have opportunity and they can legally maintain their own money. You know, back in 1950, a woman was considered like a subservient part of the marriage. She couldn't have credit in her own name.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so that's all erased. We're all equal as far as being able to buy things and hold assets or go borrow money. And so I'm not so sure the community property regime works for the modern couple when they're both out there in the world attacking it and bringing in their own money and spending, managing and spending their own money.
Yeah, definitely need to update how we look at property division.
Yeah, because then you got guys needing prenups.
Right.
I don't think you should need a prenup.
Well,
Myself.
That's the fear, right? Where I am today, or any successful man, someone like me, it took me 30 years of work to get here, to amass the wealth, and wasn't married, single that whole time. Now I'm going to go marry someone and make her a millionaire instantly. She didn't have to work for it. She became a millionaire because she was hot and married me. And anybody I married, that same thing would happen to them. So now it's like, how do I protect these assets?
Right.
I know
right.
that.
And to be fair to Texas law, separate property is constitutionally protected. It's protected under the Texas Constitution. Absolutely.
Okay.
But community property is defined to be everything, and if that's there at the time of divorce, and the person wanting to carve out separate property has to prove it.
Yeah, the community property presumption.
Community
right?
property presumption. So here's a nightmare case that I had. It was a very short marriage, but it was later in life with a lot of assets.
Okay.
A lot of assets. The couple is retirement age, and they'd only been married, say, 5 or 8 years. Significant amount of assets that were in stock accounts. They were invested in all kinds of mutual funds. He had Fidelity accounts, blah, blah, blah. You name your investment house, he probably had money in there. And he was very good, he probably still is, at churning the money and making it profit.
Okay.
Right? Well, here's the deal. Your asset that you had before remains your asset. But all the profits from it, all the income, the rents from that is community property. And if you reinvest that money back into the asset, you got to prove it. So now your work's insane. So this poor guy had to go back and find all of his statements going back to the year before marriage so he could be safe and prove what he had. You got to prove what you had at the time of marriage. And then he had to trace every penny throughout that whole marriage to claim that back out.
That doesn't seem right.
That doesn't seem right. This was a later in life marriage. This is certainly not some young girl leaving her family home who had no way to fend for herself in the world. This woman had her own life before they got married.
She probably wasn't staying at home raising children during that marriage.
No, their kids were all grown.
Right.
Any kids in this picture were well out on their own. So, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these people are getting married, if at all, but later in life now, when you're already financially established.
Yeah.
And like you said, the family law system in Texas seems to still be geared for the 1950s nuclear family.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're slowly carving out space for same-sex issues, that sort of thing. We're slowly carving out assisted reproduction, child issues, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But property, division of property is pretty much back in the Stone Ages. And a word about prenups real quick. So many people are afraid of prenups, but I can assure you that the woman who married the man in our story just a moment ago, she knew there's a prenup. You know what the prenup is? It's the presumption of community property.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the presumption of a just and right division. By the way, the Texas Family Code does not say 50-50. Texas Family Code says a just and right division,
Okay.
which most courts are going to interpret that the only way it could be just and right is if it's exactly even 50-50. We need to talk more about that later. But in so many people's minds, especially the person with fewer assets coming into a marriage, they know that. That's their prenup.
Right. So what you're saying is Texas law is your prenup if you don't go get your own prenuptial agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
And I am going to opine on human relations here that if you can't talk to your spouse about money on that level and have that discussion ahead, not your spouse, your intended, your betrothed. If the two of you can't talk about that right up front, then you might ought to be thinking twice about whether this is someone you really want to marry. Because there is no more intimate business than being married together.
Right. So if you can't talk with your, let's say, girlfriend or fiance, boyfriend, about a prenup, about a prenuptial agreement, then maybe you shouldn't be getting married. It's counterintuitive.
It is it would seem counterintuitive because the prenup is contemplating failure. But we've already contemplated failure as a people.
Yeah.
It's baked into our law, and people rely on that. So I don't see at this point in my life, at this late stage, looking backwards, I don't see why it shouldn't be more acceptable to sit down and talk about your money and how you want to handle it going forward in life.
So
It
you're
should
all
just
for
be
it.
easier.
Yeah. You're all for prenuptial agreements. You think everyone should have one?
Yeah. Or the state should come out with a property regime that, to make it easier to say, okay, we're going to get married and we want full community property regime, or we're going to get married and we want no community property regime. It just ought to be, instead of requiring additional work and additional, everyone's got to disclose assets. A prenup's not a prenup done right is not an easy thing. Everyone's got to know what everyone's got. You got to have full disclosure. Each side's got to have their own lawyer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing I get. And by the way, I don't have a big prenup practice. It's not something we do much of, but it's worth discussing.
What percentage would you say of your divorce clients have a prenup when they come see you to get
Zero.
divorced? Not many, huh?
Zero. We get 1 or 2 consultations, I don't know, per year, maybe 3 or 4, where they come to us and there's a prenup. But I've never landed one of those cases.
Okay. Now, recently I've heard this statistic: 56% of all marriages end in divorce. And then the guy said, and another 20% are just in an unhappy marriage. They don't get divorced maybe for the kids, but they stay for one reason or another in an unhappy marriage. So he's saying 76%, 56 plus 20, 76% failure rate. Marriage. What do you think? Should we be getting married still? Like, guy like me, young guy like me, should I ever get married?
I don't think you can stop it. I mean, there just is that special thing between a man and a woman when they're betrothed to each other. It's a special kind of commitment. It's beautiful. I think it's a good thing. But, you know, earlier in this conversation, you brought out the magic statement. The state is involved. So if the state's going to be involved in marriage, let's create some sensible options that make it easier when we get to this point of the road.
Yeah, nobody wants to admit that because we want to have this romantic idea of marriage. And nobody wants to talk about the legal aspect.
Yep. And here's the nuts and bolts of how that looks at divorce time. It really is a paper battle for the property division. The documents, you're going to have to swap financial documents. Like, you know, if you're managing bank accounts and she's managing bank accounts, you're going to have to go pull all those bank account records and credit cards. You're going to have to go pull all that and exchange them for a certain period of time. Whatever the attorneys decide that they need to do full discovery and dig back. And that's the biggest pain in the butt for my clients, bar none.
Financial history.
Financial history, yeah. Pulling that all together, proving it all up. It should just be easier.
What would make it easier?
Changing the laws, creating some new laws that, you know, creating a separate property regime marriage.
Okay.
That everything in this marriage, from this day forward, we keep everything as separate property. If she earns it and spends, that's hers. If he earns it and spends, that's his.
Yeah, or maybe looking at marriage and divorce on a case-by-case basis, I guess. Everyone who gets married, no matter if you get married right out of high school and you have nothing, or you get married and you're both plastic surgeons. Everyone uses the same community property regime.
Yeah.
Whereas separate property might apply better to people who are already financially established. You both have a job. There's no children. Or maybe it's your second or third marriage even. I don't know. But we're all using this community property presumption. And it scares the crap out of men who are financially established and thinking of getting married.
It should. Now let's talk about the realities of that though in separate property. So here's the story I tell people to explain it.
Okay.
If two ranchers meet, you know, they're going to be husband and wife. They each have their own herd of cows. Just say they're equal. They're both same kind of cow, same value, same size herd, everything. They get married. So those are obviously they're separate property herds, right?
Okay.
All right, and they're branded. You can tell the two apart. They get married and they blend their herds. It's pretty. They can just go separate the herds out by brand if they divorce, right? That's easy. The calves are community property.
Yeah.
So it all is not lost. If you get married, you can go pull your bank statements. You can show what you had before. But the trouble starts coming for the guys we're talking about when you start mixing the calves in. You reinvest those dividends and interest back into the herd, and now you got this huge tracing problem.
Right. What's mine and what's yours, basically.
Exactly. But during a marriage, anything that you brought to the marriage always stays your separate property unless you gift it. And that we'll talk about that later. That's a silly thing people do, especially with houses. But what you brought in before is yours, separate property, stays that way. Anything you got by gift. Wedding rings. Someone gives you, you exchange wedding rings. That's a gift. That's a done deal. You're not getting, and there's a lot of guys who need to hear this. She's not giving you the ring back in the divorce. You're not going to go pawn it. It's hers.
Okay.
Okay. But any gift you receive while you're married that was given to you, that's your separate property. If it's a gift that was given to the couple, that's conceivably 50% separate, 50% separate. And that's different than community property. Anything you inherited. So the law says gift, device, or descent. So the device and descent is either there was a will or it was someone died with no will, intestate.
Okay.
So anything you inherit like that is your separate property. But people do silly things and they don't think about it, or maybe it's not so silly. You assume your marriage is golden and you're going to be married forever and you don't mind sharing your assets, and they blend those assets. And then if a later divorce comes, that's where it gets sticky, and where I think Texas law makes it harder than it has to be to prove that out and pull that money back out.
To try to unwind all these financial dealings and say whose equity is this, or who gets this increase.
Exactly.
Okay.
Increase in value is not divisible. So let's go back to our two ranchers with two herds, and say that say they're different kinds of cows, and now she's got, I don't know, Holstein dairy cows, and he's got Brahma meat cow, whatever.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not a rancher.
Yeah.
But you get the point. And so the value of Holsteins goes up 300% during their short marriage, and the value of his cows go down. There's no offset. Those are their separate property. That's their separate properties. They're separate property herds, and it doesn't matter what the intrinsic value went up or down. That's not divisible as community property. The only thing that's divisible as community property is the interest and dividends from that, the earnings, the rents,
Okay.
the calves that they have between the two herds.
Got it. Only if their herds mix, basically.
Right.
Okay.
There's probably some rancher out there who's gonna call me on my cow
Well-
names.
Okay, as long as we're on property division,
Yeah.
we talked about prenuptial agreements and community property. Recently, this soccer player got divorced,
Yeah.
and everything he owned was in a trust for benefit of his mother.
Right.
And then so the wife didn't get anything.
Right.
Is that possible here in the state of Texas? How much can you use a trust to protect? Should you be considering that even if you're getting married?
Okay, so first of all, when we see these divorce stories, you always got to consider what jurisdiction they're in, because I don't remember that story very well. I remember it vaguely. It's a year or two ago.
Yeah, it was this year. He was overseas. I think
Okay.
it was in Europe somewhere.
Yeah, but it was not the state of Texas. So the law was not based on the state of Texas. So that's something that's important to think about. Anytime you read these news stories and start flashing how that would affect my life, or the people in my world,
Okay.
does it really? Because no, that's a foreign law. Can you take community property? Okay, so if you got married and you didn't have a separate property regime, let's just break this down brick by brick.
Okay.
All right. You got this trust, and then now you're earning, go out and do whatever you do, kick a soccer ball, practice in court, practice law, maybe you're an engineer, whatever. You earn your money. Now you take that money, your paycheck, and you shove it into a trust, right?
Right.
So you have now taken community property and put it somewhere. It didn't quit being community property just because you put it somewhere,
Okay.
right? Now, if you were this soccer player and you had all these royalties from before and you had all that in that trust, and I'll speak a little bit about Texas here. If that trust is set up in a certain way, then that money that's already in there is definitely not going to come into play in the court in dividing the property. But it's got to be, just in broad terms, it's got to be a trust that the person, that the husband in this case can't just break into and out of like his private piggy bank. It's got to be a real trust that's set up properly.
Got you. Irrevocable, is that what those are called?
Yeah,
Irrevocable
yeah.
living trust?
I don't do probate law or estate planning, and I don't try to
Okay.
cross that line. But it does come up in divorce cases, and that's really what a Texas divorce court's going to be looking at, is how the trust was set up. Is it set up to be some kind of a true trust? It's a hands off, and no matter what happens with this guy, that trust is just going to keep operating, even if it does give him some income out of it. It is its own entity and vehicle, and he can't stop it.
Okay.
Okay. Versus the piggy bank kind of trust. You know, we use some kind of a trust legal vehicle to set it up, but I can still take money in and out of it. I can cancel the trust. That instance, that a Texas trial court in divorce is probably going to say that that's community property.
Okay. Yeah, because you get all these street lawyers and that you get all kinds of advice. Like one guy told me, put your marketing agency inside of a trust before you get married. And that's the context I hear it in. People trying to put their business inside of a trust.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how that would work. The trust has to pay you, so whatever the trust pays you become community property?
Well, if it's income, yeah.
Okay.
Income from all sources is going to be, not all sources, but just about any source is going to be considered community property to be divided.
Okay. It almost sounds similar to everyone telling me to make an LLC. Like you go,
Right.
and it's like, an LLC isn't a magic bullet of protection. You have to use it in a certain way.
Exactly.
The court's going to analyze whether you were doing that. I guess
Exactly.
the same thing with a trust.
Right. So I don't get involved in setting up LLCs to protect assets or trusts to protect assets. I've got attorney referrals that I'll send people to if I see that someone needs that kind of help. But we get into the unwinding of them. You know, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? With a trust, you know, whether the validity of it, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, is this trust? Was it set up honestly? Is it truly a hands-off kind of trust, or is this really just? And I keep using the word a private piggy bank because that's how some people set up a trust.
Right.
And that trial court's gonna that's what they're gonna be looking for.
Okay. So trust, not the magic bullet everyone thinks it is.
No, and an LLC is not the magic bullet that people want to think it is. You need to talk to a business organization attorney. There's so many great ones.
Okay. Well, then let's get back on divorce. People hire me to audit their incoming phone calls, and I wonder, that's a huge step. You're in a marriage, you've probably known for a while it was going to end. One day, you take the step of calling a divorce lawyer. Like, walk me through the psychology of that moment for a potential client of yours.
Man, just making the decision to call the attorney, that's a big step. I mean, it's a hurdle. I've been there. You don't know.
Right.
There's so many unknowns, and you don't want to commit. And frankly, I think that for a lot of us, dealing with a lawyer in the first place is sort of a taboo kind of topic. You know, we're brought up fearing them or fearing the black magic voodoo that they're involved in. We just don't want anything to do with it. So there's kind of a fear factor right there. Fear of the unknown with spending money. You know, what's this going to cost? If I pick up the phone and call this person, they're going to want money from me to do their job, right? And I think that's kind of a hurdle for some people. And the truth about that is so many people can actually afford it. It's not that I look at their finances, it's not that huge of a thing for them, but it's the unknown.
Right.
You know, it's like if all of a sudden you had never driven a car, right? And all of a sudden you're moved to this place. I don't know, say you grew up in some part of the world with cars, island in the Pacific that you walk everywhere. Now you get flown to America and all of a sudden you need a car. What are you going to do? You know, you need a car. There's a gazillion cars out there. I'm scared of cars. Cars hurt people. But you're going to have to, at some point, do a little research and go talk to someone about a car. And I think that's what a lot of clients go through is just that hurdle of, overcoming that fear of the unknown.
Would you say most of your clients are women or men?
About half and half, actually.
Okay. Who do you like working with more? Or you don't want to say a preference. Like,
I really don't have a preference. Who do I want to work with? I want to work with people who want to open up and tell me their whole story, who think that I care enough that they can set their fear aside and just tell me what they're really thinking about their case. That's who I want to work with.
is there some reluctance there for new clients? They don't want to talk about, maybe there was some infidelity they don't want to talk about.
Nobody wants to talk about their dirty laundry at home.
Oh,
There's a shame element to it, a shame and fear. It keeps us from being open. I mean, Dustin, you and I just talked about a highly personal matter to you, and you've obviously done a lot of good work on yourself because you shamelessly can talk about that in front of the camera. I mean, I don't know that I acquired that ability myself until the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, it's tough to open up and talk about your. And here's the thing about, at the end of the day, no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
And it's when you realize that it comes so easy. There's people who are going to be watching this who are going to think about, your personal little saga we just talked about, and they'll care a little bit and they'll get the story out of it, but none of them are just sitting there in judgment of you because no one gives a shit that much.
Yeah, that's true. And these things are so common too. I guess when you're going through a divorce, you're thinking you're the only person ever in the world that's got divorced, but it's very common to have, you're either in counseling or you're getting divorced or you're at a church group trying to heal your marriage.
Yeah. I mean, look around you. 76% failure. There's people around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. That kind of lets into one of my my first rules of getting through a divorce successfully, how to handle it.
What is that?
You can share that you're having this experience with other people, but the experience is so unique, you can't really share it with anybody in the hopes of getting help from them on how they got through theirs. And mostly that applies to dealing with the facts and the law. People can help you with the emotion.
Okay.
I can come to you and say, Dustin, man, I'm going through this divorce. I didn't expect her to file this divorce. It hurts, and here's why I hurt and all that. And we can talk about my pain, and you can help me through that, right?
Right.
But I can't sit here and say, well, she's trying to take the kids away from me and this and that and the other. And then, you happen to have been through an ugly divorce with kids. So you tell me about your kid experience and that. And now we're sharing facts and legalities, and no two are alike. And you just can't share that. There's no fruit from from oversharing your divorce with other people.
Right, because they're so different.
They're so different. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of my rules for getting through divorce is be careful who you talk to about it and what you're talking to your friends about.
What about the stuff you post on social media about it?
Oh my God.
Tell us about that.
You definitely don't want to post case facts. You just don't. There's no profit from that down the road. I think, I think it's the Kardashian mentality that people want to get involved in this little, gnat's ass detail about everybody's lives and get involved in these little intricacies. Unless you're Kardashian and you know how to market that, no one really cares that much.
Right.
And the only reason people care about that is because we have this consumerism about us and we lust for these higher things. And so we hold these Kardashian type people in this high esteem and we lust for those things. So we pay attention to all those little details. But 99.999% of us are not the Kardashians. Our friends don't care to get that involved, and it's not helpful to our case to post on social media all these ugly details.
Yeah.
Share beauty with the world. There's still so many beautiful things around. If you're going through a hard time, whining about the exact details on Facebook as they pertain to your spouse is not the way to get through it. Certainly not a way to share beauty with other human beings.
Well,
Go see a counselor.
yeah, don't use the Instagram psychologist. Okay, Robert, let's talk about, I'm a potential client. I've picked up the phone. I've called your office. Walk me through the process of hiring an attorney, hiring you to get divorced, to me and my spouse are no longer married. How does that process work?
All right. The problem with trying to give you the whole soup to nuts, the whole A to Z, exactly how your path's going to go, is that every single one of these steps can have, I won't say infinite, but a lot of permutations. Things can go wrong in a whole lot of different ways. And we'd be here for days if I broke it all down. But generally speaking, I'm going to break it down for you how this goes.
Okay.
So ring, ring, you call my office. You're going to reach a receptionist, and she's going to set you an appointment with my intake specialist. Lovely person. You're going to love talking to my intake team. They're going to listen to you and hear everything you got to say about the problems that you're going through, what you're feeling, what you're afraid of, what is happening, what your spouse is doing or not doing to you, that sort of thing. We're going to hear your story and genuinely listen to you and make sure that we're a good fit. If we're a good fit, we're going to make you an offer to work for you on a flat fee basis. And we're going to break down all those prices and show you right up front what it's going to cost you to get your divorce done. If you still want to sign up with us, you sign a retainer agreement. We get you intake, get you through our intake system, and you'll fill out some forms, obviously. There's going to be lots of paperwork, filling out information. And from that point forward, we can get started working. I'll meet with you at that point and hear your story again, only I'm going to be analyzing it through more of a legal lens and what we're going to need to do to move your case forward, okay? And then we get the case filed into the court. And then we'll get your spouse served with notice of the lawsuit. And obviously along the way, there's a million things that can go wrong with all these things, but we'll just stick to the kind of vanilla neutral case that works along pretty well. So your spouse gets served. And then your spouse is going to answer the lawsuit. Hopefully they hire an attorney. And that's actually easier, by the way, if both spouses have attorneys to work a case through than trying to do it with one of you with an attorney and one of you without.
Okay.
Things will go faster and cleaner if both sides have an attorney. Okay, so now your spouse is answered into the lawsuit, and we got an active case going with two sides involved. Ideally, the two attorneys will talk at that point and decide what information we need to swap so that we can figure out issues relating to kids, issues relating to property division. And then we'll take a time period and swap that information, and then we'll go meet at a mediation, and we're either going to mediate and try to settle the case all the way to the end, or we might decide that we need to gather more information before we finalize the divorce. So maybe the first mediation is for temporary orders. And we get that done. And then if we only did for temps, then we're going to do some more information exchange. You know, maybe there's some old bank statements we need. Maybe we don't agree on how we're going to deal with the kids, and we want to get an external expert, an outside expert involved in, figuring out the best path forward for the kids. And then once we have all that information together, we'll go back for a second mediation. And hopefully that brings us to a conclusion, and we can just go prove it up in the court and be done with the divorce.
Okay.
So obviously there's a lot of places here that things can go wrong, right?
Right.
Service. We may not get the spouse served. They may dodge service. We may have to go to the court and get substitution service by substitute service. Maybe we got to get the process server to post it on the door or something like that. Maybe your spouse doesn't answer into the case quickly. Maybe your spouse doesn't hire an attorney and wants to come up with a whole bunch of weird legal theories and filings into the case. Those are all things we got to deal with. Maybe we can't agree on exchange of documents. Maybe we can't agree that we need bank statements back so far. Or kids' report cards, whatever it is the issue is we're trying to tackle. Maybe we can't agree on discovery issues, and maybe we got to go to the court and get some help from the court on that. Those are little things along the way. So as you can see, the path can go fairly quick and clean if everybody's on the same page and nobody's trying to buck the system or come up with novelty ideas on how we should do this differently.
Okay, now you said mediation.
Yeah.
Does the court require you to go to mediation, or can people skip mediation?
Harris County and most of the surrounding courts are absolutely going to require mediation. Harris County is going to require mediation before you can have a full hearing on temporary orders, and they're definitely going to require a mediation prior to final trial. Every one of the judges in Harris County wants you to try to mediate your case.
Okay. Court-ordered mediation before you get into a court.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the judges in Harris County want you to try to sort your stuff out between yourselves rather than bring it to the judge.
Okay. So in perfect world, you settle everything at mediation. You just go get your order signed in court.
In a perfect world, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how long does it take? How long does the divorce process typically take?
Okay, the shortest amount of time that it can take is 60 days by operation of law. And unless there's some extraneous fact that lets you shortcut that. But for probably 99% of the people, the shortest amount of time it can take is 60 days. In reality, it's going to take us longer than that to exchange information and work our way through the court. Remember, Harris County courts are busy. You don't just show up on Monday and get your thing heard right there, or even that week. You're trying to work with these coordinators and get stuff set for weeks or months out.
Okay. Who typically pays? Is one side paying for both attorneys? You said your spouse should have a lawyer too.
Sure. Okay. So the community is responsible for legal fees in a divorce.
Okay.
So if the harsh reality of that is if there's only one income in a marriage, and we're seeing more and more where that's the wife. But if there's just one income in a marriage, that's the income that's going to pay everybody's legal bills. That's the harsh reality. But the community is going to cover the legal fees for both sides.
Wow. Okay. Let's discuss that mediation process then. How does that work if you're getting divorced?
Okay. Important to understand about mediation. We get a lot of people who've got questions about this who are scared of it or worried or think it's an official court proceeding. It's a sanctioned court proceeding, but it's not an official court proceeding. So a mediator in Texas is someone who's not always a lawyer, but typically is a lawyer, and someone who attends a special class and gets a special certification as a mediator. And they manage the mediation. And so the mediator's job is to go between the parties and help them find a solution. Not as an authority that says you have to do it this way and this is the way it works and this is the way it's going to be done. That's the judge's job.
Okay.
The mediator's job is just to facilitate communication. So typically in a mediation, you'll either, Zoom is very common, or meet in person. The sides will not be in the same room together, whether that's a virtual room or whether that's real physical real estate. The two sides are going to go somewhere and be separated with their attorneys, and the mediator is going to go between those two sides and communicate and help the two sides reach an agreement. That's the mediator's job, and that's what the mediation process looks like.
Okay, so you're not the mediator. You're just an attorney representing someone who's at mediation, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, and the other side has their own attorney most of the time?
Right, exactly. Now, I have been appointed by courts to be a mediator for other cases, but I don't represent one of the parties in those cases. A mediator doesn't have a dog in the hunt. A mediator doesn't have a stake in the case, doesn't represent anybody. Mediator's just a truly disinterested, neutral third party who tries to help facilitate communication and tries to help facilitate a deal getting done. And the beauty of that is that the parties know their lives better than the judge does. And the judge is kind of hand-tied. The judge's hands are sort of tied by the family code and the presumptions baked into the family code. You know, if you don't like the standard possession schedule for kids and you want to come up with something different that works to a unique work schedule, you're going to have a better chance of getting something that works for everybody at mediation than if you go have a judge try to figure that out. Judge might just go straight to the family code book and go, no, you're just going to do standard possession just like everybody else does standard possession. I'm not going to consider anything different.
Yeah, okay. So at mediation, you can deviate from the Texas Family Code if you both agree to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And just about every single time you can tie the judge's hands to your agreement, and the judge has to follow your agreement with very few exceptions.
Okay, then it seems advantageous to make the most of your time at mediation.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
kind of have more control over your divorce process there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about this. In court, you want to tell your story. You want to get your story out, and you want the judge to hear it. And the tools for that are very limited by the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure. You can only say so many things in court and in so many ways. Mediation, you just spill your heart out to the mediator and just talk and tell the mediator everything that's on your mind. And a good mediator is going to listen to that, get your permission to take the pieces of the story over to the other side that are helpful to get a deal done. They're going to do that. They're going to get a deal done. Good mediator just wants to get a deal done.
Okay. Have you seen it happen where they don't come to an agreement at mediation? Like maybe I want the children during Christmas. No, you can't have them during Christmas. Like there's some kind of disagreement.
Yeah.
What happens if you
Yeah.
can't come to an agreement at mediation?
Okay, so mediations do bust. There are mediation sessions that reach a complete impasse, and that happens. And in that instance, you're either going to have to keep trying to work with each other, or you're going to take your matter in front of the judge and let the judge make the decision. You know, and good mediator would have told you, well, that's not going to happen with that Christmas thing. Y'all are going to split Christmases. The judge is going to make you split Christmases. That's not even worth going to trial over, right? So a good mediator will help you avoid trial by giving you those little inputs.
Okay, so a mediator often or always is a divorce attorney who kind of knows what's going to happen at trial.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A good mediator knows the most likely outcome. I mean, nobody can pretend to know the exact mind of a judge, but you can know pretty well how a court generally slants and the things they're generally going to do, and you know exactly where their hands are tied, and they have to make certain decisions.
Okay.
There are instances where we will bust at mediation and reserve certain issues for trial. I had this recently in a case where we mediated, we settled all the property issues, and we settled all of the child issues except for two little items. There were two rights and duties of parents that we just couldn't settle at mediation. So we took that to the judge, and we had a very limited trial that was less than an hour, quick and clean, got in and got out, got it done.
Was it a favorable ruling for you? Something you could live with?
It was a favorable ruling for my client, indeed. She can live with it.
All right, great. Well, let's say thanks for coming on the channel. Where can we find you if we need to hire Von Dohlen Law Firm?
www.vondohlenlaw.com.
All right, Robert. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Have a good one.